Well, Thomas Matussek is a former German ambassador to the UK and permanent representative of Germany to the United Nations. Welcome, good to see you. First of all, Putin says he doesn't want a war. At his press conference, Russia says they're partially withdrawing some troops from Ukraine's border. Given your long experience, how do you assess where we are on Ukraine this evening?
Well, I think there was a sigh of relief this morning, and the immediate danger of a major attack tomorrow, which was actually predicted by some American intelligence services, seems to be over. However, we are not out of the woods yet. It will be a long, hard slog. There's still over 100,000 troops at the border. But the good news is that Scholz and Putin both said that they want to continue negotiations. Putin even mentioned that he would like to negotiate in the framework of the Normandy group, in the framework of OSCE, the NATO-Russia Council. So, as Winston Churchill used to say, Giorgio is better than war.
The US president and France's president, I think, will talk tomorrow. What are the next steps on that diplomatic road?
Well, the next step, in my view, would be that we have the Normandy format, who talks about the ceasefire between the warring groups in the eastern Ukraine, to bring that into effect. On the other hand, the Ukrainians have to live up to their obligations to bring in some legislation which allow elections, and they have announced they will do that. And now the Russians have to do their part. And I think it's a brilliant idea to call on the NATO-Russia Council, because that's what it was created for. And if Russia and the West want to talk about a new security architecture, I think a continuation of the Helsinki process, Helsinki, Charter of Paris, and so on, would be an ideal format within the OSCE.
It's been said a number of times that Russia and the United States are the only real players in these peace talks. Has this whole crisis unmasked and found out European governments and the EU?
Well, I think this is mainly a European issue where we live here. We live under the enormous threat if the climate deteriorates. However, it is true that it is one of the objectives of Vladimir Putin to talk to the American president on the same eye level, because a sense of humiliation, which always played a role in explaining Russia's aggressiveness, that was certainly there. But I think both have to be done. And I think NATO and the European Union in the past have played it very, very well. There is a united front, and don't forget, we have had the philosophy in NATO ever since 1967 of the Armel Doctrine, meaning we are standfast in the defense of our values and interests. At the same time, we remain open for dialogue and cooperation. And this is what we have to bring to the table now.
On Monday, Ukraine's President Zelensky told the German Chancellor Scholz that Russia is using Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline, as a geopolitical weapon. Tell us about that sense of this gas pipeline and Germany's dependence in particular on Russian gas as part of this story and this vulnerability.
Yes, I mean, we get 55% of our gas requirements from Russia, 35% of our oil we get from Russia. So it's quite clear that an economy like ours, which needs a lot of energy, is very, very dependent on Russia, especially after we made up our minds to get out of the nuclear energy altogether and to get out of coal by 2030. Now, this is true. This creates interdependencies. But during the Cold War, we liked interdependencies because we felt if both sides have an interest in it, it's a win-win situation. But what is true, if you're an East Central European, you see it can be used as a weapon, and there are certain, let's say, gestures or have been remarks by Putin that he tends to use it as a weapon. So if push comes to shove, if we need sanctions, it's quite clear that even though it's painful for us, Nord Stream 2 will be part and parcel of those sanctions.
If this crisis is resolved peacefully, is Russia's president weakened or emboldened by it?
Well, I think any leader should be emboldened by peace. And I only hope that Putin interprets it the same way. Because as we have seen so often in the past, if a leader thinks he is getting a stronger position by fighting wars against his neighbor, it only ends in tears. And I hope that Putin understands that in a good and solid partnership with the West, who has so much to offer to Russia, that makes him much stronger than kicking off unnecessary wars.
And do you think Putin has secured a strategic victory without having gone to war?
That depends very much how he interprets it. I could imagine, of course I cannot look into his head, I could imagine that the fact that he is now talking directly to Biden and that the United States are extremely alarmed of what could happen, that he has sort of had a gain in prestige. If that is his aim, okay, but it's an aim which is with a very, very high price. I mean, to mobilize over 100,000 troops does not come at zero cost.
When they write the history of this crisis, what will they say?
Well, they will hopefully say, if everything goes well, they will hopefully say that both sides shrank back from after looking into the abyss and they finally came to their senses. And I think what is certainly going to play a role is if you stick to international law, if you stick to the treaties you have signed, then you also increase your own security.